Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Before my friend Doug Muzzio, professor of public affairs at Baruch College, retired his CUNY program City Talk to devote full time to teaching and to scholarly work, we often talked about the current state of government and politics. And I've missed hearing what he has to say. But now, although it took some persuading, he's my guest, and I'm glad to welcome him.
It's my pleasure. Obviously, this is my pleasure. It is so
nice to have you.
Yes.
Have you missed?
Yeah, I missed the interviews and I missed the guests, but I don't miss the extensive preparation and the anxiety before.
Okay. So should we talk about local politics?
Let's
the one
start.
thing I want to talk about
go
is
ahead.
polls, but I can do that later.
Okay, do whatever you want.
All right.
You're the
I'm
boss.
not happy. I must say I'm not happy with the Democratic National Committee to begin with.
Neither am I, for a variety of reasons.
These debates, they come 4 years after they were criticized for favoring a candidate.
Right.
So this year they're going to be very careful.
Right.
So now they have they have a lot of candidates. I admit that's a problem. But now they have this criteria that either you have to raise a certain amount of money,
right.
I think it's 130,000.
Right.
And you have to reach 2%
right.
of polling in at 3 polls,
right.
or something like that. And I think that's not right. I think it's a self-feeding selection process.
Well, it is a self-feeding selection process because the better you do in the polls, the more money you make, the higher you're standing with the public. So it
the more
reverberates.
you're in the press.
That's right. It feeds on itself. But what criteria are you going to use? You have to have some criteria to limit out frivolous candidates and reduce the field. 20 people or 18 people is too big. So you use a combination of the money poll and the public opinion poll.
Now, the public opinion poll, when they poll the whole country, the sample from the whole country?
Yes.
Not just the sample in the states.
Oh, no. It's a national.
So how
RDD.
accurate does that come for selection of candidates?
Well, what it does is it provides a reasonable threshold for acceptance. It's not a cure-all or a be-all, but it's a reasonable criterion.
But this is my complaint. The candidates are spending a lot of time in certain states.
Right.
And we don't know how that campaign works out. I mean, it could be a big change in states once a candidate is campaigning to an audience.
Sure. So
But what happens is the newspapers then begin a selective process of covering the people who are at the top of the poll.
Of course, because they can't cover everybody.
So then you lose some really potentially very good candidates.
That you do. And
you're left with some ridiculous kind of candidate. Or
that's right. We did
unqualified.
That's right. As the Republican Party did in 2016.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right.
All right. But you think it's still legitimate?
Well, I mean, given the uncertainty, it's a reasonable criterion.
Well, it's all based on having debates before the Iowa caucus, right?
Right. Oh, of course. I mean,
Do we need to have debates before the Iowa caucus? Could we let Iowa, for instance, be the selection?
No.
Why not?
Well, I mean, you want to expose
because
the candidates.
Then you're too narrow a constituency.
Right. You want to broaden the constituency, and you want to hear from them. You'd like not to hear their stump speeches, but every once in a while you hear something new and interesting. Mm-hmm. So I think it's valuable.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. I won't be as strongly opposed to it as I am.
Well, you can be.
Let's switch to the city and state.
Ah.
Now, you've been gone for a while. I mean, from here.
Right.
No discussion. There is some change.
Oh, absolutely. There's a sea change at the state level. I mean, the Democrats gaining control of the body just radically transformed what's going on. You have progressive legislation. You probably have the most successful session in history. Just if you articulate just the list of the laws that were passed, it's just incredible. And the comedy between Hasty on one hand and Andrea Stewart,
Right.
it is remarkable.
Cousins.
And they're an effective counterpoint to the governor. The governors had to dance to their tune
Actually,
rather than...
he's become very much, right, exactly.
That's right.
But what was interesting is the change came not from, I mean, it came from independent candidates,
Oh, absolutely.
which was really enheartening, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you defeated the vast majority of the IDC. You punished them. You got a 39 to 34, or really a 40 to 33 advantage in the Senate. You have an overwhelming advantage in the House. You have a unified government, and it worked.
So what does it say for the future in New York?
Well, I mean, New York is blue. It's getting bluer. And if you're a progressive, it's the place to be. If you're not, it's not the place to be.
How do you account, for instance, for our Senator Gillibrand to be doing so poorly?
I don't know. She's just not connecting for whatever reason. It may be the size of the field. It may be the issues that she's focusing on. It may be a personality thing. People just aren't attracted to her.
I think with women, who she would, assuming she would,
Right.
who she once supports, I don't think she's forgiven by a lot of Democrats
For Al Franken.
For Al
I
Franken.
think there's a real
I'm
Al
encouraged
Franken.
about that.
Yeah, there's a real Al Franken, I believe, an undercurrent in
Yeah.
her lack of success
Right.
and lack of enthusiasm
Right.
is because of what happened
Yeah.
with Al Franken.
Right, because it was so out of,
Yeah, it really was.
right. And it started a whole long,
Well, I mean,
in that hand it did, you know.
Yeah,
so-
well, good things come out of,
Right.
unwise actions,
right.
maybe.
So, and what about the city council?
The city council's the same way. You have all these young progressives. You've got, again, a very progressive legislature. You have, some conservatives, some moderates, but in the main, they're young, active progressives.
So do you think the party is going to, the organized party in New York State is going to change at all as a result of all this?
Well, if it doesn't change, it's going to get defeated. It's
Yeah.
going to get defeated at the city level and at the state level as well.
These candidacies were not party-supported candidates.
No, they weren't. And they were very effective.
And now with the, let's talk about term limits.
Term limits, the next election in 2021 is
Right.
going to be
That's-
like 2001. It's going to be a major, major turnover of the elected official, which is bad because, I firmly believe that elections are the term limiters. And to have 35, 36, 37 of them being forced to resign, and some of them moving on to higher office, you're going to have a cadre of 13, 14 people who have the relevant legislative experience.
So let's discuss what that means. I mean, first of all, it'll be a free-for-all, basically, on the council level.
And
I mean,
also the speaker's race. Who do they elect the speaker?
what do you think about the whole thing? What can be done? Did you follow the charter revision?
Yes. I've followed the charter revision since 1989.
Okay, so tell us about it.
Well, I think they did an extraordinarily thorough job. They were probably the most thorough charter revision since the 1989 charter. They thoroughly investigated. They held hearings. They came up with 5 umbrella questions, and they dealt with significant issues.
Like what?
Well, the voting, redistricting, police oversight, a little bit of land use. They did a number of issues, important issues, and dealt with them, I felt, in a reasonable, constructive, and not a non-acrimonious way. It was assumed that having all these officials appointing them, they would come in, little interest here and little interest there. No, I think they were a very professional charter commission.
Would they not have recommended a change in the term limits?
They could have, but it would be extremely difficult to do. I mean, the voters just, I don't think, would stand for it, and they'd vote it down.
Do you think they might change it now,
No.
after next year?
No, I don't think, I don't see an impetus for change, even though I personally am opposed to it. I don't see the political will to do it.
Are we developing enough new candidates to move for the system? In a funny way, this is like a career ladder now.
Right.
Much more so than it ever was.
Right.
And that becomes a problem, I think.
Yeah, I think it does. The career orientation flies, a little bit against the, working for the public interest. And that conflict is always there, your self-interest versus the public interest. Most, I believe, and I might sound naive, opt for the public interest. I mean, there's always private interest involved, but...
As we see in the United States Senate.
Oh, God, and the presidency of the United States.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go on.
No, go ahead.
No, I want you to go on.
No, I think that careerism, you're always plotting your next move, and you're always campaigning, even if you're not campaigning for an office. And not to say that that's any different, it just seems that everybody's doing it.
Right. And it gives you an advantage. I'm not
absolutely.
arguing about the candidates that won in the special elections,
Right.
but almost nobody else had a chance
Right.
against an incumbent.
Right.
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 So we had that kind of thing. We have Attorney General that moved in and
That's
a council
right.
member.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you do have, some of the old politics is still there.
Yeah.
The establishment exists. It is not as powerful as it once was. I mean, AOC and Crowley and all the progressive Caban almost winning the DA's race in Queens. There may be a progressive challenge to Cy Vance. So it's not only the city council and the state legislature,
Population.
but it's other offices as well.
Right.
I mean, it's like there's an open season on incumbents, and the longer you've been in office, the more you're a target.
So that speaks for defense of the term limits.
Right, well, yeah, yeah.
But go on about. I'm very
Yeah,
interested.
I mean, you look at congressmen like Engel and Maloney and Jerry Nadler. They're all in the 70s, and they're all established, and they all have somewhat of a national reputation.
And they've been
more
there
than
for
others.
a long
And they've
time.
been there for a long time. And incumbency is a great advantage. It gives you access to press, it gives you money, because money flows to power and power flows to money. But
And we see it. Look at Nadler is now the chair of the
Right,
district.
right.
And Engel's chair of Foreign
Foreign
Affairs.
Affairs. So, I mean, by dint of their seniority, they've gone into really powerful positions that could redound to the benefit of New York State residents and the residents of their districts.
But there's unrest there.
Yeah, there is unrest. I mean, they're all going to get primary challenges. I wouldn't be surprised if Meeks doesn't get a substantial challenge. And even people like Hakeem Jeffries and Tom Suozzi might get, opponents. So it's, as I said, it's open season on incumbents.
Yeah, that kind of thing destroys a local party. Not that the local parties were that strong to begin with.
Right, and they're definitely on the decline. I mean, the Caban election was an indicator.
Absolutely.
It was a wake-up call to the Democratic establishment and the county organization.
Their second wake-up call in
Yes.
Queens, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and the quality of the candidates, I think, is different.
Yeah,
They're braver. I don't think they're independent. They're no longer any pressure from.
right. They don't have organizational obligations.
Mm-hmm.
They have obligations to their supporters who again are different than the old type machine. They're motivated differently. They act differently. They campaign differently, and they're intense, and they're interested, and they're not going to give up.
And they're more issue oriented.
Yes. Yes.
They're really more interested in the public policy rather than the
then that's what we were talking about before,
Yeah.
the public interest as perceived by the candidates and careers. They're not sucked into the career thing yet. They're interested in what they perceive to be the public interest.
So let's go back to the United States Senate, because if there's ever an example of your fear of not getting reelected, doesn't that seem to be there and in the House?
Of course. Of course, I mean, particularly among Republican members of the House,
right.
They're terrified, and Republican members of the Senate, they're terrified of what the executive will do. Either they're co-conspirators and they're fellow travelers, or they are cowed by the power of the base.
Have you ever seen anything like this before?
No.
In your lifetime?
No, and I hope never to see it again.
Can you understand how we've allowed Donald Trump to stay president?
Well, I mean, you have to go through a process, and the process is impeachment or prosecution, which isn't going to happen. If impeachment happens, we'll see where it goes. But that's really the only remedy for this president. Now, I mean, for example, people like Madison, McMaster, and Tillerson, they could come public and state their objections to the President of the United States, his character, his policies, etc. But we even see a hesitancy on the part of these established figures not to cross this president.
The only one doing it is Walsh, who was a
Right,
Tea
and
Party guy, who's crazy anyway,
who's
right?
crazy. I mean, he's a birther. He's anti-abortion. He's a bad character. I mean, he's a bad character reformed, and he's saying things that I say, but I don't trust him.
But how have we allowed, the United States, have allowed the things that are going on in the country?
Well, I mean, the fact is that there are 35 to 40% of the American public still supporting this president. And my argument is less with him, even though it is substantial with him, that there are tens of millions of Americans who support a misogynist, a racist, a xenophobic, a mental case. Dishonest, liar.
You really think people don't object to that? Or they can't see beyond their...
Well, I mean, this may be unfair, but I mean, they are, in my mind, uninformed, uncurious, and somewhat ignorant and ill-informed about what's going on, and he does for them what they need, and that is display anger, and to a certain extent display cruelty. There's something cruel about that base in terms of its acceptance of Donald Trump in his entirety.
It's interesting. And you don't think that you've never seen polls, though, that indicate that large percentage of people that meet your characteristics, have we?
Yeah, I think the polling shows that...
If you poll about another issue, though, suppose if you took one of these things you're accusing those people of and polled, would they all fall in line and all do the same thing?
Some issues they would. They probably fall in line with immigration for the most part, anti-abortion for the most part. You go to religiosity in the schools.
Right.
There's the whole congeries of issues that are emblematic of the base.
And then you've got the media. My husband used to say media is short for mediocrity, which is not a bad saying, right? Anyway.
Having worked there, I bridle a little bit.
And I think we're a little bit media too now.
That's true.
Fox. In the old days, it seems to me there would have been some questioning with the FCC.
Yeah, but the FCC...
This is one agency that's become
It's
Useless.
neutered.
Useless.
Neutered. I mean, he's neutering loads of federal agencies, including the Justice Department, the Federal Elections Commission, the environmental protection, the education. He's neutering these agencies for his own politics.
But he's also associated with people who are ideologues who know more than he does.
Oh, well,
And they're the ones who've taken over, right? You don't think so? You think
I think he's influenced by them. I think he's owned and operated by the NRA. But he's so dysfunctional. I really think that he's got some kind of psychic breakdown. There's something not right. There's a condition, and there's an erosion of his language, and his reaction at the recent economic conference just showed that there's a disorganized mind. It's not strategic,
Well,
it's disorganized.
it's a distorted ego. I mean,
Well, everything
he is really like a psychopath.
everything is interpreted and acted upon in terms of himself, his money, his power, his adulation.
And then
everything goes through that filter.
And he's relentless in giving out what he thinks of himself.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the greatest self-promotion, and they believe it.
Right. That's what's so crazy. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the national election.
Okay, go
you
ahead.
have some feelings. Tell me. What are your observations?
You know what? I like 10 of the Democratic candidates.
Almost, if any of them.
Well, I mean, if
any
any of them
yeah.
become the nominee,
Right.
I'm voting for them. My personal favorite, because of her depth of knowledge, her quickness of mind, and her toughness, is Elizabeth Warren. Now, people claim that she's too schoolmomish, she's too scolding, she's not electable. Let's see. Let's give the process time. We have several months before the Iowa caucuses. We don't know whether that's going to be true in November, December, January. But I like Elizabeth Warren. I'd be satisfied with Biden. I like Jay Inslee, even though he's out. Wang makes sense to me. He
does, doesn't he?
Yeah, Hickenlooper made sense to me. I mean, they all make arguments that are appealing. But I think that Elizabeth Warren's got for me, the right package.
And the energy and
yeah,
everything.
and she's
the
she's
way
tough.
to accomplish what she wants to
Right,
do. That's
right,
what I think
right.
is so good.
And it's the detail as well. I'd like to see her in a debate with Trump.
What's happening is a lot of people are making their decision about who they think can beat Trump. Now, how do you, I mean,
Well, I mean,
how can we decide who's going to beat Trump?
Well, that's impossible. I think it's very unlikely that you can narrow it down to one person who will beat Trump.
I'm so optimistic. I think anybody can beat him. Any candidate.
I'm not that optimistic. I think the president's got support.
Yeah.
And with the Electoral College, it's not that, a majority of people, 3 million more people voted for Hillary, and she's not the president. So it's targeting those states and maintaining those states that he won the first time.
So what would you say to people who are determined, who are trying to figure out who they're going to support and are basing their decision on who they think is going to win?
That's going to change. That opinion probably will change, and you can think it now, but in November and December, you got to make a decision whether there is a person who is the most electable. Is that person different from your policy preference?
Right. One of the big things that I think has changed over my lifetime, or in the recent years even, is the emphasis on the representation of women candidates.
Yep.
And of candidates of color.
Right.
It never happened before, right? Can you
the-
remember that?
This is an explosion of 2018. House election was eye-opening in terms of the nature of the candidates who were running, their ethnic background, their religious background, their racial background, and the diversity of experiences. Really, in my mind, it was unique in my time in politics.
And just, we only have seconds, AOC?
I think she's smart, she's tough, she's an instigator, she's in a sense an arsonist, but she's got very sound quality of thinking. And she's into, she's tireless.
I think she's very smart.
Yeah.
And smart also with strategy.
Yes, I think so too. And that doesn't mean that she hasn't made mistakes and will make mistakes, but she's an up-and-comer.
And she has courage.
Yes, and she antagonizes the opposition and allies.
Okay. So we've come to the end.
Ah.
I know. You'll have to come back, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.